Hey, what's happening? My name is D, and welcome back to another episode of Book Reviews with a Regular Dude. Today, we're going to be talking about A Fate Inked in Blood by Danielle L. Jensen. Before we get into that, I got to give a shout out to my Plus Ultra Don't Fretter, my top tier supporter on Patreon, Laughing Cat Dog. Thank you so much for your support. You're helping to ensure that I'm able to keep creating this content and put it out as frequently as I do. If you want to support the channel in a major way and ensure that I keep putting out this content and put it out as frequently as I do, or even more frequently, make sure to consider subscribing to my Patreon. Okay, back to A Fate Inked in Blood. I don't really know if this book is super popular. I assume it is because it's got a lot of ratings on Goodreads. I saw an Instagram ad for it, and it said, like, for fans of Rebecca Yarros and Sarah J. Maas, and I was like, that sounds like something, not that I would enjoy, but that other people would enjoy me talking about for some strange reason. So I read it, and to be completely honest, I feel as though that comp title is simultaneously right on the money and sort of an affront to this book. And I'm not saying that it's like a masterpiece or something like that. I just think that it's like leagues ahead of like Fourth Wing. But if you know me, you know my channel. That's not like saying anything. But yeah, this is an adult fantasy romance book. Maybe it's new adult because I think the main character is like 20. And new adult's such an undefined category right now that I'm not entirely sure, but I'm pretty sure you could call it adult or new adult. But it's not YA, and it is a romantasy. I'm going to read the premise real quick in case you haven't heard of it. A shield maiden blessed by the gods battles to unite a nation under a power-hungry king while also fighting her growing desire for his fiery son in this Norse-inspired fantasy romance from the best-selling author of the Bridge Kingdom series. I don't know what that series is, but cool. Bound in an unwanted marriage, Freya spends her days gutting fish but dreams of becoming a warrior and putting an axe in her boorish husband's back. Freya's dreams abruptly become reality when her husband betrays her to the region's Jarl, landing her in a fight to the death against his son Bjorn. To survive, Freya is forced to reveal her deepest secret. She possesses a drop of a goddess's blood, which makes her a shield maiden with magic capable of repelling any attack. It was foretold such a magic would unite the fractured nation of Scotland beneath the one who controls the Shield Maiden's fate. Believing he's destined to rule Scotland as king, the fanatical Jarl binds Freya in a blood oath and orders Bjorn to protect her from their enemies. Desperate to prove her strength, Freya must train to fight and learn to control her magic, all while facing perilous tests set by the gods. The greatest test of all, however, may be resisting her forbidden attraction to Bjorn. If Freya succumbs to her lust for the charming and fierce warrior, she risks not only her own destiny, but the fate of all the people she swore to protect. Now, I took like a fair amount of notes for like the rant section of my review, so I'm gonna do a spoiler-free that's like pretty quick. I divide my videos up like that because when I started making videos like 8 months ago, I was told to think about who my videos were for, and I was like, I have no idea, because I just started doing this. I kind of do it in this way so that anyone who hasn't read these books but is curious about a review can watch up until the point where I start to get into spoilers, and then they have the option to, let me spoil the entire book and provide commentary as we go, or they can bow out and be like, okay, based off of what he said, without spoiling anything, I'm going to go check this book out, or I'm not going to go check this book out, depending on what I said. Which I suppose could mean that I'm trying to be like a people pleaser or whatever. I don't really see it that way. I just kind of see it like my channels were pretty small and book talk is pretty niche. So I'm like just trying to, okay, yeah, I guess I'm trying to please everybody. So let's talk about the characterization and the characters in the book. I think that this is one of those books where the characterization is like the character development of the MC is kind of the main focus of the book. Like, it is. Like, the way that premise was written, it sounds like the romance is like the focal point of the book. And the romance is definitely a big part of it. But it's not the biggest, most compelling part of the book. I think that the romance almost moves the MC's plot forward in some instances, and it's the way that the MC's character is developed, but I'd say that the character's development is kind of the bigger focus. I didn't write a script for this video. Guys, I think like a couple of videos ago, I was like, yeah, I'm going to try to do 2 videos a week. And I'm trying to get ahead of myself and blah, 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 blah. I got big plans for the channel. Right now, my day job is like just pure chaos. And I've been working like pretty late. So I haven't had time to edit or film or write scripts. In books that are kind of in this same category, because I totally understand what they mean when they say that this book is meant for fans of these other authors. I get what they mean. I would agree. I think that that's very true. I think those books have been accused of being like smut first or romance first, plot, world building, characterization, all that shit, like fifth. And with this book, I wouldn't say that that's the case. I'd say that it's the main character, Freya's journey, is first and foremost, and how she changes as a person based off of like all the horrible things that happen to and around her, and also the romance that she has with Bjorn. I think the focus of the book is more how does this impact her and how does this change her, and who is she? This character has spent her entire life doing what's expected of her and sacrificing everything for the betterment of others, and she's been used a lot. So, what does she want? Who does she want? Where does she want to go? What's she fighting for? All that kind of stuff, I think, are the bigger questions being asked in this book. And then the romance and the spicy scenes are sort of secondary to that. I don't give a fuck about the romance. Like, it's very predictable from the jump, and there's nothing like sweet about it or compelling about it. I think part of why that is because it's so predictable. Like, soon as Bjorn was on stage, like, you didn't even learn his name, I was already like, oh, cool, so he's gonna be like the love interest, and she's married at the beginning of the book too, which isn't a spoiler. And my first instinct was like, either that marriage isn't gonna last because something's gonna happen to this dude, or this is going to be like an affair type of romance or whatever. But I knew who he was right away. So as things carry on, I was like, cool, yeah, like they're going to end up together eventually. And there's nothing compelling about it. I think part of that is that Bjorn's character isn't really explored with much depth. Like, they definitely go into a sad backstory and there's some like mysteries around him, but none of those mysteries were solved. Like, I think this book was set up to be a series, and so as the series goes on, maybe we'll learn more about Bjorn, and then the romance could end up being more compelling. But as it is right now, I'm just like, yeah, like, I see where this is going, and I don't care. But Freya's characterization, I think, is pretty strong. Like, she's definitely not the same person from the beginning of the... Well, you know what? I don't agree with what I was about to say. It's not that this is a completely different person from the beginning of the book to the end of the book, but more so this character's constraints around her identity and who she is and who she wants to be are sort of broken, and she's sort of set loose. So in the beginning of the book, she's expressing private thoughts that we can hear as the reader, but she would never act on or say out loud. But then by the end of the book, she has given in to those thoughts of like violence and fighting and stuff like that. And she's more confident maybe, but it's not like a completely different character. And it's not like a Prince Zuko level character arc or anything like that. I think the reason I was going to say that I think that her characterization or her character is pretty strong is because, one, like, she's a strong character. Like, one thing that I appreciate is that we're not told that she's smart or strong or anything like that. She's just doing stuff. And I think even at one point, there's a lot of times where people assume that she's kind of stupid because she grew up in an isolated little village or whatever. And she doesn't necessarily go like, well, actually, I'm like the smartest person ever and I like to read and blah, 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 blah. She's kind of like, okay, well, yeah, I'm not that worldly or well educated or whatever, but I'm not a fucking idiot. And also, like, I'm capable and I can handle my own. And she tries her best. I also really like that she's not necessarily like the best fighter ever to ever fight at all by the end of the book or anything like that, because I think sometimes that sort of You go from somebody who's like never fought or never served in whatever fantasy world military to like being this elite soldier in like 2 weeks. I always hate that arc because it's too fast. And yeah, that's coming from somebody who's a fan of shonen anime, but I also hate that trope in anime. But she does grow and hold her own, and she is capable, and she is like, I guess, like still probably like more advancing faster than one might expect or whatever, but she's also like a demigod and whatever, who cares? I don't find Freya like particularly likable, and I wasn't necessarily rooting for her the entire book. I was sort of like, oh, I wonder how you're gonna get out of this one. I'm very unfamiliar with Norse mythology, so I didn't have any like context clues that might be like, oh, it's based off of this fable or this story. So I guess it's gonna go like blank. I didn't have any of that, so I'm just kind of along for that. I'm like, okay, yeah, I wonder how you're gonna get out of this one. I wonder, what's gonna happen here, whatever. Sometimes I guessed right, sometimes I didn't, whatever. I'm fairly neutral to Freya as a character, and that's really the only character that's fleshed out or is interesting at all. Bjorn is the love interest, just like that's what he is, that's what he does. He's not quite an edgy Shadow Boo. He's a little bit more energetic and a little bit more talkative, but he's kind of like edgy Shadow Boo, but with a little like he's more sarcastic and chatty. So he's almost like edgy Shadow Boo, but also kind of like if Loki from the Thor movies was straight. Like, I can't think of a character to mix him with that wouldn't kind of be like, I wanted to say Sokka from like Avatar, but that's insulting to Sokka. But he is like sarcastic and he never shuts up, and he becomes very paternalistic and not necessarily controlling, but very like, oh, I don't want you to get hurt. That's what it is. He's kind of both archetypes of romance fantasy. So he's both the grumpy golden boy and the edgy shadow boy mixed into one character, because there's just one guy so far. Every other character on page is the worst, and that's all we know, and that's all we need to know, or they're a friend who dies. Moving on to like plotting, not necessarily like getting into the plot, but just talking about my basic feelings on how the story went. I'd say it's probably medium, almost slow paced. The fight scenes were described pretty well, so I had a pretty good sense of what was going on. I was able to like picture it, and it made sense. I think there was a little bit of like geography where I wasn't entirely sure how far away things were from each other. Like, they felt far, but then they would get somewhere pretty quick, and I was like, I don't know what's happening. But as far as like events happening and how the story progressed, it wasn't all over the place. There's some books where it's like the plot's all over the place and it's zigging and zagging and not in a good way, or it's like no plot, just vibes. This isn't that. It's pretty straightforward. Quote unquote twist at the end. I didn't fully expect. I expected something, but not exactly what was done. So I'm like, all right, that's cool. You got me a little bit. Like, I expected it, but not it exactly. I don't like giving details in the spoiler-free section, but yeah, it was like I expected the thing to happen, but then the details that were exposited, I didn't guess all of those, because how could I? Yeah, I wasn't super invested in the plot. I don't know. I was curious as to what was going to happen, but it wasn't like, I gotta know. It was just like, okay, how are you going to get out of this one? Moving on to world building, you know what? Like I said before, I couldn't get a good sense of the world, like where everything was or how big the nation of Scotland was, or there's like an enemy nation. And I was like, I don't know where this is, like in relation to where we are. And that's maybe one of the downfalls of an audiobook, is that you don't get a map. That's maybe my only real, like, I would prefer hard copies or physical reading over audiobooks if it worked for my schedule, just so that when I'm in a fantasy world, I could read a map if I wanted to, if they included one. Just going off of what somebody's telling me, it's not always clear how far away something is. But then again, one could argue that is like the failure of the author's writing. I don't really know. I don't really want to get into that discussion or debate. I'm just saying that like I didn't quite understand where things were or how far they had to travel or how far the enemy ships had to sail to get to Scotland and all that stuff. You know, there is magic in this world, and it's basically like people who have a drop of blood from a god can do magic, and their magic ability varies from god to god to god to god. You know, nothing really broke the rules. I mean, there is like a twist that sort of breaks that rule, but it's also it makes sense within the confines of the book. So I'm not really bothered by it. It makes sense. Whatever. It's fine. It's fine. It's very fine. Like if you're familiar with romance fantasy, I don't think this is gonna throw you for a loop. I don't think that it's the most interesting or intricate magic system I've ever read, but it's not confusing. It doesn't contradict itself, and it's not like so stupid. You know what I'm saying? And then just from a craft perspective, line by line, there were a few lines and phrases that made me stop in my tracks. There's some anachronisms that I don't like. I don't like them in fantasy at all. Like something that I've learned is that if the book's tone isn't goofy from the jump, like if you can't tell that it's meant to be sort of comedic, and then they start using like fuck, and it's sort of parallel to a time period like medieval times or something like that where that word wouldn't have been introduced yet, I don't like that. I think that it's trying to be edgy, and I think anybody that's trying to be edgy is just like cringe to me. I don't know. Maybe I'm just so not edgy that I find edginess to be cringy. And anytime an author does like fuck, period, you, period, I'm like, shut up, go away. That's so dumb. No one talks like that. I know people talk like that. It's just so silly. And I think if the book's not silly, then it doesn't work for me. Like, Assistant to the Villain is based off of a TikTok comedy series, or like a series of sketches on TikTok. And the book itself is dependent on a bit. So it being silly and it having all these anachronisms because it's trying to be like a workplace comedy in a fantasy world setting made sense. So I was like, I don't care that much, you know, like you want to reinvent the wheel as to how like donuts were created or whatever, that's fine. But in a book like A Fate Inked in Blood, where the tone is very serious and some of the shit that happens is metal as hell, I'm like, why are we saying fuck? I don't know. Like, it's so like it's already pretty badass and serious and edgy just based off of like demigods get marked by what god their parent is or whatever with a blood tattoo, and there's a dude with an axe made out of fire. That's metal enough. You don't need to be like, fuck this guy. You know what I'm saying? I'm also not crazy about the word cock in books, but I don't even have a good reason for it. I think it just doesn't sound good to hear. I don't even like saying it there. I think it's just like not a good syllable. You know what I'm saying? Not for me. That's it for the spoiler-free part of this review. I'm going to get into the spoilery, like, rant review. These are the notes that I took while I was reading. First note, before we even start, book 1 of the Saga of the Unfated is, at the same time, a heavy-ass name, but also kind of silly. I didn't know what unfated meant at that point. I didn't know it was a word. I get it now. I stand by that note, though. It sounds like, ooh, that's very fantasy, very serious, and kind of dumb. But I think all fantasy, even when it takes itself very serious, is kind of dumb. Somebody's going to really hate that I said that. That's okay. I'm just some guy from the internet. You shouldn't take my opinion seriously. Chapter 1 opens up. MC wants to stab her husband. That's pretty metal. He's a demigod and is like hogging all the fish and then charging villagers double to buy fish from him. Like if Percy Jackson grew up and became a capitalist. So then Percy threatens to cut the MC's face with a knife. And she's like, do it and the village will dishonor you. And then she thinks to herself that he's a narcissist. So he won't he won't do it because then it'll be like, oh, that dude like cut his wife's face because she teased him a little bit, or like didn't gut fish right or whatever. I was immediately like, that's an anachronism for sure, you know, like saying narcissist, and it never comes up again. But it is like that kind of language. Like people didn't talk like this, and I think bringing in like modern psychological or scientific terms into like a world where the technology and the research wouldn't be there, it'll always throw me off. Some people will say like, whatever, it's a fantasy world. It could have happened some other way or whatever. And that is also a totally valid way to approach books. I don't approach it that way, and this is my channel, so whatever. Make your own video. So they're having like an argument because I think that's all they really do because they hate each other. And evil Percy Jackson uses his magic to force a bunch of fish onto the beach. And then I have a note that says, which I guess is where they are. Didn't catch that detail. I just thought they were gutting fish and just assumed they're doing it like a shop or their house or something. But yeah, so on the beach, he beaches all these fish and he dips and he's like, yo, gut all these motherfuckers. But it's more than they could ever sell before the fish rot. And I could hear my wife just been like, that's so wasteful. What an asshole. And I thought that was so funny. Not that it's not funny that he did that. I just think it's funny that my first thought was Alana would not appreciate this. Freya's like, nah, forget this, and starts throwing the fish back into the water. And she accidentally hits a dude in the face. She doesn't hit him in the fish. She hits him in the face with a fish. And then Freya's immediate response to hitting this dude with the fish is like, is the fish okay? Did it make it back into the water? And the dude's like, well, what about me? And the first thing she notices is that he's very attractive and says only a handful of years older than my 20 years. And my note there just says, bro. I'm pretty sure that bothered me more than it does now. But I think just that, like, oh, he's a little bit older than me would have been fine. But I think the author's trying to be like, this is how old she is. And also this dude's maybe a little bit older, whatever. And, like, I get that needs to be established. A pretty clunky way to do it, I guess. It just sounded weird. I don't know. I didn't like it. So the dude walks out of the water, and she's like, I can see his wet trousers cling to his well-toned legs and ass. But, like, how can you, if he's walking towards you, how can you see his ass? You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know. That's, like, is he close enough that you can go, like, Chapter 2, the Jarl and the husband make a deal, and it turns out that the hot guy is the Jarl's son and is also a demigod, and he's forced to fight the main character, Freya, to the death. But it's a setup. The main character is secretly also a demigod, and she's unfaded and has, like, shield magic. So she can make force fields out of silver light, and she's unfaded. But also there's prophecy explaining her fate. So she's a prophecy child, and apparently she'll unite all the tribes or some shit, and the Jarl's like, you're going to make me the king. And then he's like, I'm going to kill your whole family if you don't roll with this. So she agrees to be his second bride. Percy Jackson is like, cool, I'm going to go marry your best friend who your older brother has been in love with since you were children, and I'm going to make her life miserable. So then Freya steals the son Bjorn's axe made of fire, and throws it at the back of this dude's head and kills him. Again, metal as hell. My note says, Freya steals hot guy's, brilliant pun, by the way, fire axe. Get it? Fire axe. And I don't know if I was trying to make myself laugh or if I thought I'd find that funny later, but, you know, good for me for trying, I guess. Chapter 5, she meets the Jarl's wife and realizes that this dude doesn't actually want to marry her. She just wants, like, to be king. You know, he wants her power to defeat a coming enemy. I guess this is relevant. You know what? Sure, let's make this relevant. Her hand gets really scarred up from holding the fire axe, like it's burnt, and she gets healed by another demigod or whatever. And I like that kind of sticks. Like, it's not just instantly healed. Like, it's healed enough that she can use her hand so she can hold a shield and stuff, but not so much that it's like an instant all cure. And I think what I like most about that is that there's some stakes there. because not I don't want to always compare everything back to like Fourth Wing, but it was my introduction to romance fantasy and like I guess book talk books, so it is sort of like a point of reference for me. But the thing about like the Fourth Wing universe is that every time that main character gets hurt, it straight up doesn't matter because she can just be healed by, I think they're called menders or something. And it's just so like nothing, there are no stakes in that book because you know none of the characters that you get emotionally attached to are ever going to truly, like, they're not in danger. They're not going to die. You know, every time Violet like, you know, pushes her body past its physical limit because she's got internalized ableism, she'll be fine, you know? And so it's boring and it doesn't matter. This, it's like, okay, sure, she can use a shield and sure, she's all right. But also, she's permanently marked by this like scarred hand and it hurts sometimes and she needs to use like special salves to ease the pain and all this stuff. And I think that that immediately tells me that, like, you know, if she gets cut by a sword or something, she might not die, but that shit'll stick with her. And I like that kind of storytelling. So this is kind of an aside, but I'm going to talk about it anyway because my channel, I do what I want. But I watch anime a lot with an author named R.S. Twelves who writes, like, she's written a series of, like, young adult spy thrillers called the Agent Bennett Saga. Agent Bennett Saga. The first book's called The Field Agent. Second one's called the First Trader. I don't remember what the third one's called. Fourth one's coming out soon. She's dope. She's one of my best friends in the world. And we watch anime together, and it's kind of fun because, like, I like, you know, none of y'all ever read the stories that I write, probably. But I like to draw inspiration from, like, anime and manga stuff. So, like, a year ago, she told me that she was like into anime, or she was getting into anime and she wanted recommendations. We ended up just deciding just to like meet up like once every couple of weeks and we just watch anime for like 3 hours. And it's funny because our different preferences for how stories go really come through because, you know, like a character will get like something as graphic as like his arm cut off or get really badly burnt. And then RS will be like, okay, so like someone's going to use their magic power, snap their fingers, and then everything will be okay, right? They're totally fine. Everything's going to be okay. And I'm like, no. And why would you want that? Like, you know? And I think for me, I like a story with stakes, and I like to see, like, I said this in my last video, but basically, I like to see human characters, flawed, imperfect human characters react to and respond to a fantastical world. And that's a really interesting kind of story to me. And let the fantasy sort of be an echo or a metaphor for something going on in our real world, like, you know, like racism or misogyny or transphobia or something like that. You know, like, you know, instead, I just find that kind of interesting, and that's what I like about fantasy. I just think that's like interesting storytelling. And then, you know, you throw in like magic powers and crazy combat that you never see or whatever, and that's just like really interesting to me. RS really likes the kind of stories where there aren't really stakes. Like, you know that these characters are never in real danger. Like, oh, people are dying around them, whatever, but they're fine and everything's going to work out because that's like familiar and safe. And it's like the idea of going on an adventure, but also knowing that the main crew is going to be fine. And I think both are valid. I think that both are valid if executed well. Like, obviously, I think that, like, if you had some kind of book series where everybody's just dying left, right, and center, and it's like it's happening so fast that you can't even get that emotionally attached, or if like the true main character that everybody loves like died 3/4 of the way through the book, I would still be like, what a monster. And on the other hand, I think if you're reading something where it's so obvious that nothing bad's ever going to happen to these people, that could be kind of boring. And I'm sure these have like literary terms or something that I'm just not smart enough to know. But I think if executed well, both are valid. The one where the stakes and the danger feel real because there's no quick fix, there's no undo, reset, go back to save option, is just my preference. So the fact that, like, you know, third chapter, she is already marked as a completely different person because she has this like scarred up hand from holding a axe made of fire. Pretty metal, pretty dope. I'm into it. Her best friend comes to visit her, and the Jarl's wife and the guards don't trust her because they're like, well, now that we've established that this is who you are, like you're the shield maiden, you're the child of prophecy, everyone's your enemy now. And the best friend, it just comes to say thank you for agreeing to be the Jarl's second wife so that the best friend and her older brother can be together and stuff and spare her from a marriage to her late husband. And Freya's kind of pissed that the best friend doesn't even try to sacrifice herself or try to beg her not to go or something like that. Like, not even try to fight with that decision. It's just like, wow, you're doing that for me? Thanks, man. That's awesome. And, like, I get that, you know? Like, I have a bunch of friends that I've stuck my neck out for, and then they just like, oh, dude, thanks. And they don't even, it's like wrestling for the check, you know? Like even if you know you're not, like, even if you know somebody's not going to pay, it's kind of like when people do like, oh, you didn't have to do that, but also thank you. Like, it's that. But when someone goes like, thanks, that can feel kind of whatever. And it's also revealed that the best friend has always known about Freya's magic because her older brother told the best friend about it. And I was like, he couldn't bear the secret or whatever. And it's like early days in the book, but you already get the sense that like her family sucks and her friend sucks. You know, I didn't say this in the spoiler-free part of the video, but all the characters that aren't Freya or Bjorn suck. They're all assholes. But I think what makes this book not insufferable is like the world feels harsh, so it makes sense that everyone else is harsh. And also none of them are so cartoonishly cruel that it's annoying. You know what I'm saying? Like, even the Jarl and his wife, when they interact, you can see that they love each other. And I think that like it's not a sweet romance. It's not like, aw, but it is like, okay, like there's some humanity to them. And, you know, the brother and the best friend, they love each other. And it is like, I guess there's just enough, they're not fleshed out, but there's a nuance to them that makes them just palatable enough that this book wasn't a nightmare. You know what I'm saying? The wedding happens, and then there's a ritual to mark Freya with a blood tattoo, hence the title. And then there's some prophecy mumbo jumbo, whatever. Chapter 8, it's time to consummate the marriage, but the wife hates it and everyone hates it, so they agree that Freya will swear on an oath and they can pretend that they're married, but that they're not actually, or something. And the wife is a witch, so she casts some kind of blood oath spell or whatever to swear to like never harm the Jarl or his blood, or something. And then the Jarl and his wife, they have sex because they're in like this great hall, and there's a party going on to celebrate the wedding and the fulfillment of the prophecy, or the beginning of the fulfillment of the prophecy. And so everyone's listening to hear them consummate the marriage. So the Jarl and his first wife are like, okay, we're gonna deal with this. So you go hide or something. I don't know. And so Freya dips and sneaks out of the Great Hall and goes for a walk. And she bumps into hot guy Bjorn. And then they see raiders coming in the distance. Chapters 9 to 10, the raiders want Freya. They want to be the one to control her fate, and they want all the nations united under her, or under their Jarl. So the Jarl like has her locked in the Great Hall with a bunch of like innocents and children and stuff like that. But she wants to go fight. So she sneaks out onto the roof of the Great Hall, jumps off of it, lands in a barn. Bjorn finds her, and they decide to sneak onto the enemy ships and set them on fire. That'll force them to retreat, and that's what happens. She said, Bjorn, fuck you. And I hated that. You know, it's an anachronism. I call it a fourth wingism. I hate it. Another reason why I don't really like fuck or other like cuss words like that in romance, fantasy, or just in fantasy in general, I don't care if it's romance, is that like the setting, the prose itself is trying to be like poetic and pretty. and then you throw just a really abrupt word like that into it and it doesn't work. So I think, a writing style where I don't remember if there's any swear words in a Master of Jin, but if there are, it wouldn't bother me because the writing isn't that kind of poetic. And then I think they're in the water and they have like a weird moment where they like she's like leaned up on him, or like he's trying to lift her out of the water, and so they're like very physically close and she gets turned on by that. And then chapter 11, people blame Freya for all the deaths, and the Jarl's like, Bjorn, train this fool and never leave her side. And I was like, oh no. It's basically like the one bed trope, but worse. Chapter 12, they train. It's awkward. We learn a little bit more about Bjorn. His mother was a seer and is the one who gave the prophecy about Freya. Chapter 13, the Jarl's younger son arrives with a spy from another nation, and he suggests killing Freya like so many times. So Bjorn is a bastard. I don't mean like he's a bad guy or whatever, but I mean like he is the Jarl's son, but his mother's not the Jarl's wife. And that like comes up a little bit because there's some tension between the wife and Bjorn, but it's not like super interesting. So they set out on they set out on some kind of journey or quest. I don't remember why they originally were leaving. But they Freya sees a specter. It was like a ghost or whatever. And the specter tells Freya that she needs to make a sacrifice at this temple, otherwise like her fate will be cut short or something. So everyone's like, oh, well, you got to go do this or you're going to die. The Jarl's like, well, you can't die. I need you in order to become king. I don't know what is up with me today, dog. Like, it's fucked up. I don't know what's up with me today, man. I was just like... Chapter 15, they make camp and then they're ambushed by other people, tribes that don't want this Jarl to be the king because he's an asshole. So the Jarl's like, okay, then let our group split up. Bjorn, take this lady up through the path of Helheim, and we'll lead them like on this other trail. And this path to Helheim, they're like, yo, you can't do that. That's crazy. Oh yeah, so they're talking up this like path to Helheim or whatever, and it turns out it's like a tunnel through this mountain that'll lead to the top, but it's full of Norse mythology zombies. So they go in, they get attacked by these zombie things, and then they're cornered by like all of them, and Bjorn starts to taunt them, be like, oh, where's your zombie Jarl? Where is he? Is he such a coward that whatever? And then the zombie Jarl's like, well, I'm not going to take that. So then Bjorn challenges the zombie Jarl to one-on-one combat. If he wins, they get to pass through, and if the zombie Jarl wins, then like they'll kill him. And the zombie Jarl's like, cool, but you can't use your fire axe, which is a problem because normal weapons don't affect these Norse mythology zombies. So Bjorn's losing this fight because of course he is, but then Freya uses her shield magic around her own hands to protect herself from the fire of Bjorn's fire axe, and then uses it to kill the zombie Jarl. And then the zombies that were ruled by that zombie Jarl, they dissolve. There are some other zombies there that were just like cursed because they went into the cave. So then they try to eat them, but then Freya exhibits like this ability where she can curse them to hell. Then they do a little bit of banter and some arguing, like that was a dumb plan. And then Freya thinks about his dick. I don't remember why or how, but that was something that I took note of. I think it did come out of nowhere in my reading experience, where I was like, she's like, oh, what a jackass. Wonder what his dick looks like. That's wild. So then this is like chapters like 17 to 20. They make it out of the tunnel of the undead and they make it to the temple. Another tribe comes to kill Freya and there's a battle. The Jarl shows up just in the nick of time and they win. And then they do this weird ritual where they kind of do like shrooms and the gods appear and they're like, hey, yo, Freya, kind of dope. That night, Freya is like frustrated and angry because she wants Bjorn, but she can't have him. So she like masturbates. And my note is, I'm willing to bet that Bjorn will wake up, see her doing that, and then we'll get our first sex scene. And I was wrong. Bjorn wakes up, sneaks out, and Freya follows him. Freya overhears somebody she assumes is the Jarl's wife plotting with the enemy king, probably to kill Bjorn so that her son can be heir to the throne of Freya and her husband's throne, that is. Bjorn finds Freya in a hall, and she tells him what she heard, so they go to tell the Jarl, but then they almost get spotted, so they start making out and fucking in the hallway as a disguise, because like as part of this ritual, everyone's doing like revels and stuff, so there's just like orgies happening left, right, and center. It's pretty crazy. I would probably not stick around for that kind of a party. I think I'm just like too reserved. I don't know if I give off that vibe in these videos, but like if I saw a group of people trying to get down in the middle of a hallway, I would just leave that hallway because I don't want to get invited. My note here says they start fucking as a disguise because revels or something. I don't know. I'm not an anthropologist. They get interrupted, and the Jarl was like, yo, where were you? Why did you leave the room? Why did you leave the protection on the wards that my wife put up? And then Freya looks at the Jarl's other wife and is like, yo, why were you talking to that enemy Jarl? And she's like, I wasn't talking to that guy. I was talking to this lady Jarl. It's basically like an Amazon or like a Valkyrie or whatever. And then they're like, where the fuck were you, Bjorn? And he's like, I went to go see a seer. And there's a prophecy where I don't remember what the prophecy said, but it leads everyone to understand that their home village is being attacked. So then they're like, okay, we got to go back. And the Jarl is really mad. Yeah, so many notes left. Chapter 21, they're headed back, and Freya is embarrassed that she almost banged Bjorn. And she says to herself that he only responded to her like kissing and it getting all hot and bothered because he's a man and he's kind of programmed for such things. And that's on misogyny. And I don't mean that I think that the book is misogynistic for that, but I think that that's like internalized misogyny of the character. Chapter 22, the home village is destroyed. Like a lot of people survived, but some people died or whatever. And everyone's like, okay, I guess it's time to rebuild. And you know, we're going to be screwed for the winter and stuff like that. And then the Jarl's like, no, we're not going to rebuild. We're just going to go and kill that enemy Jarl, and then we'll take his stronghold. The wife isn't happy about that. It's kind of like a divisive decision that he made. I don't know. At this point, I was like, yeah, that makes sense for this guy because all he cares about is conquering. Like that Jarl character is maybe the most cartoonish in the whole book because he's just so focused on everything is about the gods and the gods wanting him to succeed, and he just believes in this prophecy so much and he wants to be king so much that it's almost cartoonish, and it's a little funny. The Lady Jarl Amazonian person invites Freya to train with her and her ladies because even though Bjorn's been teaching her to fight, he fights like a man, and Freya needs to learn how to fight like a woman. And in context, like that made a lot of sense because Bjorn, he's like a big, stocky, strong dude, so he knows how to fight like that. Whereas like Freya needs to learn how to fight in a way that works for her like physique, I guess. And it's not like a really heavy-handed like, yeah, girls can fight too or something like that. No, chapter 23, they train. And Freya's enjoying it, and then she sees a specter. Chapter 24, the specter leads Freya to see a cloaked figure carve something into a tree, and it's like a magic voicemail to let somebody know of the Jarl's plan. Bjorn bumps into Freya in the woods and then is like, why are you avoiding me? And then Freya pretty much confesses that she has feelings for him, and they start making out, and then they break it off because it's too dangerous. And Freya tells the Jarl about the spy, and he's like, cool, let's go attack now. Chapter 25, they go up the mountain, and Bjorn insists it's just a hill. I don't know why that was. I don't remember if that was ever, like, explained why he cared so much, but Freya ends up falling into a puddle, and she gets like frostbite, and they're always like, no fire or our enemies will know that we're coming. So they sleep, and Bjorn has to spoon her to keep her from dying. So while everyone is sleeping, Freya and Bjorn end up having sex, and it's not nearly as graphic or disturbing or even misogynistic as some other sex scenes that I've had to read for this channel. And I'm not saying it's like good or really interesting or beautiful or compelling or whatever. I was just more like, okay, that happened. I guess it was like that happened and I wasn't super disturbed by it. 27, they go to battle and the Lady Jarl dies. She gets shot by a lightning demigod. And then Freya, this is funny, my phone auto-corrected to Frieza, like the Dragon Ball Z character. So Freya's like, I'm gonna go kill everyone, and then tries to fight the enemy's Jarl, but Bjorn kills him first. Freya's brother returns, and he's jealous of Freya, and he calls her a mad bitch, and then Bjorn beats the fuck out of him. Chapter 29, Freya is forced to see visions of the battle, and learns that everyone who agrees to follow the Jarl, now the king, does so out of fear of Freya. And Bjorn's like, yo, let's run away, and then Freya tries to fuck him. Chapter 30, Freya goes to her mother to learn more about the goddess whose magic she has. And it turns out that the god who gave the parents like a drop of blood is basically had a threesome with her parents. And it was a trickster, but it's actually the god of hell. I think the god's name is Hale. Like Hela from the Thor movies. And there's a joke in there about Hela being mommy, but I'm too tired to make it. But then the shield goddess shows up and says, I want the unborn child to be my vessel, and in exchange, I'll heal your son, because I think the whole trouble started is like the older brother was very sickly and weak. And then the mom starts like cussing out Freya and being a jerk or whatever. I was like, ugh. Everyone in your family sucks. Chapter 31, Bjorn says, I love you. And then they see a ship coming, and it's a hunter demigod who works for the king. Freya's like, oh no, my village. And then that demigod kills her mom just for selling out Freya, which I thought was pretty satisfying. I was like, good, you kind of deserve that. Freya's convinced that the King Jarl wife is the spy, and so she goes back to the fortress and punches her out. Then the enemy king attacks, and it's revealed that Bjorn accidentally killed his own mother. And the enemy's demigod, who can shoot lightning, faces Freya and Bjorn. They fall off a waterfall, and then Bjorn's like, sick, now we're free. So in chapter 33, Bjorn shares more of his backstory, and it's pretty sad, but whatever. They bang and they envision a life together, and Freya reflects on her whole life. People have only taken or used her, but never Bjorn. And it was then that I was like, oh, this is the dude. Okay, I see what's happening here. And I'm like, okay, he's either going to die or he's going to be like a double agent or something like that. And then in the last like 5% of the book. And then chapter 34, yeah, that's what happened. So the enemy king shows up, and he's referring to Bjorn as son, and Bjorn calls him father and says that his mother is alive. And then they basically just take Freya, and she's so angry and she's so betrayed. She's like, how could you do this to Scollins and stuff like that? And the one thing that kind of like threw me off about that was like, she hates the other Jarl, Bjorn, the guy we thought was Bjorn's dad, so much this entire book, but then is super distraught by Bjorn's betrayal. And I was like, I don't know, I feel like there should be a little bit more tension, but also it's the very end of the book, and it's clearly setting up the whole series, the whole saga of the Unfaded and all that stuff. I really hate endings like that where the story isn't complete. I think that I prefer book series where each one kind of stands alone. Like, you know, if there's a little like epilogue that sets up the next thing, that's cool. And I'm not saying it like makes it bad or whatever, but I find it really obnoxious. What I mean is, like, I don't think the book's bad because that's how it ended. I just find that very obnoxious. And I find that obnoxious with even some of my favorite series or whatever. You know, my mind says 2.75, but I think I want to give it like a 3. It was 3. It's super fine. Like it's probably really good if this is more your bag. You know what I'm saying? Like it's just not really my thing. You know what I'm saying? Like I think if you really don't like romance fantasy books, this isn't going to be enjoyable for you, because I think you can find some humor or some enjoyment in reading the ones that are kind of a lower quality, if you know what I'm saying. But this isn't of a low quality. I think if you don't like the genre, you'll hate this because it's kind of boring then. But if you like the genre, this might be right up your alley and this might be a really good pick. I don't really know. I didn't like it. I didn't suffer through this one. I was pretty like, I don't know. I wasn't fully engaged or entertained, but I wasn't like, I was about to lie to you again. I was bored. I don't usually listen to books at like triple speed, but I listened to this one at triple speed to get it over with because I didn't enjoy it. Yeah, I think it's super fine. Thank you so much for watching this video, especially if you made it to the end. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're new to my channel, please subscribe. If you want to support the channel in a major way and gain access to exclusive content you won't find anywhere else, make sure you consider subscribing to my Patreon, where you get an extra rant review video from me once per month, as well as access to my private Discord server where you can chat with me and a bunch of really lovely people. We're talking about writing and books and TV and movies and everything, D&D, whatever, you name it, we're probably talking about it. We're also doing a book club, so this month we're reading Daughter of the Moon Goddess. Yeah, that's what it's called. And we're going to do like a live stream and talk about it at the end of the month or near the end of the month. So yeah, if any of that sounds interesting or exciting to you, make sure you consider subscribing to my Patreon. Special shout out to my super duper don't fretters, Keisha, Cassie, Knightsmith, and Oliver. Thank you so much for supporting my content. You're helping to ensure that I'm able to keep creating this content and put it out as frequently as I do. I deeply appreciate that. Everyone else, thank you again for watching this video. My name is D. Don't fret. I'll see you next time. Peace out.